And Kupe's relevance and significance for the whole of Aotearoa, I don't need to go into that. So, Te Mano Te Wai is relevant to the Hokianga Harbour because of the tupuna name it carries and because of the whakapapa relationship that the uri have in your area. The second point, I've heard somebody talk about the presence of bacteria and maybe it's not so bad, the treatment plant is going okay. Bacteria is not the full understanding of what you are putting into the harbour in this proposal and what has been put into the harbour already. We've got emerging contaminants that we should be aware of and that should be influencing this decision significantly. The E. coli bacteria issue, sure, wastewater treatment plants can do a reasonably good job, but they don't always operate at their optimum efficiency. They do break down. And even in terms of their efficiency, while they're running well, they don't eliminate all of that problem. But I want to move to emerging contaminants. I commented on these in my PhD almost 2 decades ago, and they're called emerging contaminants, and I've provided the Aotearoa strategy for emerging contaminants for the panel because we're still finding out about them. They've not been historically understood, and we still don't understand them fully. But what we know so far is that they pose a significant risk to the receiving environments that we put them into. And that is because they are endocrine disruptors, which means they play around with the DNA and they produce deformations in the species that their DNA is getting mixed around. And this research isn't all new. I mean, they were researching the Sydney outfall 2 decades ago and found that you had fish with 2 heads and 3 tails more frequently the closer you got to the wastewater outfall at Bondi Beach. So we've known about this issue and the relationship, but the science that spells it out perfectly is still being developed. So I'd encourage the panel, given that you do have a break, to get ESR involved because they do have relationships with the iwi in the Hokianga area, and ask them to test a wastewater sample for some specific emerging contaminants that I anticipate will be present. Those contaminants are metformin or trimethoprim, and this is a drug that's associated with type 2 diabetes treatment. We know that the drug is persistent through the wastewater treatment process, and so if it is coming in, it'll be coming out in the effluent. So that should be tested for because it is an endocrine disruptor. And we have a high prevalence of diabetes, type 2 diabetes in our Māori population. And so I'd anticipate that there will be the presence of that emerging contaminant. The second one to check for is cytostatics. And cytostatics are chemotherapy drugs. Now those can find their ways into the wastewater treatment plant, and similarly they are persistent through the treatment process. They come out the other side. We need to be testing for those because those are actually designed to kill most of the things in our body when we take chemotherapy. We do not want those becoming prevalent in the ecosystem of the Hokianga and doing things we don't understand at the moment to the fish, to the other things. The third one we should be looking at is anabolic steroids. These are performance-enhancing steroids used by athletes and bodybuilders and the like, and those are also prevalent through the system. The fourth one is quite a common one, the birth control pill, estrogen, because the World Health Organization has recently stipulated that it is to have no detectable presence in any drinking water in Europe. Now, I'm not talking about drinking the wastewater, but I'm suggesting that if there is that endocrine disruptor in the wastewater stream, it's going to be a problem, because in Europe, the presence of estrogen and the synthetic estrogen in the birth control pill in their water is the result that they've identified relating with mass sterility of their male population. Okay? The fifth one is methamphetamines. EFs are already quite capable of testing for methamphetamines. These are persistent as well into the receiving environment, and I don't know what the fish are going to do when they're consuming those. So putting those out, as well as the emerging contaminants, there are antibiotics. And while antibiotics aren't harmful to us, when you put them into an estuary like the Hokianga, the bacteria that do survive in there can interact with the antibiotics and become antibiotic resistant. So when you have these superbugs in the hospital that no antibiotic treatments are addressing, it's because we're actually breeding them in our lakes, in our rivers, in our estuaries where we put our wastewater. So that's a really harmful one that we still don't understand either. So that's around emerging contaminants. In terms of the testing, I strongly encourage you to get some tests done by ESR or some other organisation if they do it also, but ESR are the government body responsible for that. In terms of my expertise, I guess, around the multimodal decision-making framework, I believe an assessment using that tool by somebody there, or we can find somebody that's linked there that could do it, would be really helpful to the panel, because it'll give you an understanding, a holistic understanding of what this proposed option actually means in terms of its impact upon Māori. And I think that's quite important, because just using the tools that rely on monetary interpretations, like benefit cost analysis and so on, or even ecosystem services as a monetary-based assessment, it excludes understandings of tikanga and kawa that are the primary way that our people, Ngāiwi Māori, understand our ecosystem and the impacts on it. And we need to be inclusive of that mātauranga Māori so that we can make better decisions. The last, just about the last one, the Cawthron report has been done on the Māori model decision-making framework, and the finding of that was it was an exemplary model worldwide when compared to anything, anywhere, and as well as that it was relevant regardless of the community. So in the context of the Hokianga, where we haven't just got iwi, we have other parts to our community, we can rest assured that the outcomes, the analysis, the assessment is going to be relevant for everybody. The fact that it uses Māori as the measurement doesn't mean it only applies to Māori. Final point, there's a document called the Hokianga Declaration, which was drafted in Waskatjanish in northern Quebec, very close to the North Pole. About 40 Indigenous practitioners in impact assessment, experts from around the world, gathered there back in 2019, I think it was, and drafted this declaration, which has been adopted by the International Association of Impact Assessment, the biggest organisation for impact assessment professionals in the world. And that finishes, it's best practice for impact assessment basically, and it finishes with the comment that Indigenous peoples have the right to say yes or no. And I think that recognition of tino rangatiratanga under Article 2 of Te Tiriti is also an important consideration in this forum. So I'll just leave you with that. I do urge you to get some testing done of the emerging contaminants. I think that would be a really good addition to the information you're taking into consideration. I'll be happy to talk to my slides in July, if that's easier, because the slides do portray more information than I've been able to share verbally. And I think Takutau, Dr. Robin Manuel, she would probably love to talk to you, but as I said, her apologies, she's otherwise committed with the FARMAC meetings in Wellington. So kia ora, do you have any questions?
Kia ora, Dr. Morgan. I guess I have a couple of questions that sit in the back of my mind. You know, we're sitting here with a community that just is basically saying no to a discharge to water. So my question to you is, if we don't have any evidence to counter yours on the table, wouldn't we be just to assume that all of these contaminants are in the wastewater and accept that rather than spending money on testing?
Yeah.
And I guess my second point is the same with the assessment on the effect on the Māori, that really there is no evidence to counter that of the community, and even the applicant, I think, accepts that there's a significant adverse effect on cultural values. So again, I think your tools are very good tools when you're in a situation when there is a competing evidence. But would you agree that in this case, if that's all we've got, then our conclusion is quite clear?
I think if there are people within the community that have that are undergoing chemo treatment, who are using the type 2 diabetes drugs I've talked about, if there's people at the gym using anabolic steroids, definitely there'll be wahine using the birth control pill. So yeah, I would expect they're there. So if you believe that they're there based on my contribution, and that's enough for you to make a decision on kei te pai, I guess if you were uncertain, then you probably would get that work done. Regarding the assessment, that's really up to Northern Regional Council, I guess, whether they want to go down that pathway. The thing about those assessments that we do is that they can be used to inform the decision, but they are also readily adaptable to monitoring the outcome of whatever decision is made. So once you've got that in place, you can report what's going on in terms of that impact on that ecosystem continuously in real time, and that is a really good tool in terms of checking for some of the assumptions that you can't prove for certain in your decision deliberation doing. So excellent questions, thank you.
Just one more from me, and that's really about your assessment, the Māori assessment that you've developed. Is that something that can be used at a catchment-wide level and would be more appropriate to be used at a catchment-wide level rather than on an individual wastewater plant-by-plant basis?
Sure. If you've done, how you come at this is really a circular sort of consideration. You could do catchment-based analysis using the tool. In fact, we're already doing that here in the Bay of Plenty. It really depends what question you want to answer first. But yeah, easily adaptable to catchment-based assessment and state of environment reporting. And you could also use it for the National Objectives Framework requirements around implementation from outcomes through to, what do they call them? I call them indicators, but they're calling them, just gone out of my head, bit of COVID fog, I guess. But there's, that hierarchy that comes down below the policy level within the National Objectives Framework, which is trying to be drafted at the moment. The Māori Model Decision-Making Framework actually delivers on all of those steps below that level. So I think there's a bit of interest in trying to set it up to do that. I'm just suggesting it might be something to look at for this, given the, I guess, the significance of the decision to the community. So, and I did genuinely say kia kaha because really you've got to weigh things up and make the decision, and I wish you all the best with that.
Sure. I'll just check to see if Commissioner Profit's got any questions for you, Dr. Moore.
Kia ora, Dr. Morgan. Thank you for your presentation this morning, and also for the mahi you've done in regards to developing the Māori model as well. And I am aware of it. I have applied it, and as well as other Māori, I suppose, tools that are around. It was really good to hear, and it's not a question. I suppose it's just adding to the corridor that you've put out there in terms of the rights of Indigenous people, and I suppose I'm touching on the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples that the New Zealand government has also signed up to, along with others, so which is consistent with the whakaaro you've shared and referenced as well. So thank you.
Could I make one comment, please?
Sure.
I did hear some comment earlier, I think, about the cost of alternatives to the discharge into the estuary. I think that there needs to be maybe a little bit more work done on that, because there are cost competitive alternatives that may not be have been considered. And we've used one of those approaches here in Rotoiti. The idea is that you're probably going to move to some sort of pre-treatment approach in your communities in the near future, like the low-pressure grinder pump systems. And what they do is they just create a chocolate smoothie of what's coming out of the house. Excuse my, rather call it that than something else, but that chocolate smoothie is actually worse than the mixed version. And the thing is, if you're going to spend your money on something at that end, at source, I really strongly suggest you look at some of the vermicomposting systems, because they remove the majority of the nasty stuff, and they do it in a freely available air environment, which means they're about 27,000 times more efficient at breaking the material down, and you end up with an odourless, clear liquid that fish can survive in, that has dissolved oxygen residuals. And the nutrients that are in there are actually readily taken up by plants. So it's a really good option if you're looking at land-based disposal, because it reduces a huge amount of the need for treatment at the plant. You really only need to do polishing with activated carbon or biochar, which can be produced relatively cheaply if you've got large-scale forestry in the area. And then you can discharge it to land. And you know that the majority of the problem has been removed before you pump it around in a reticulated system. The issue is we only look at the wastewater treatment plant and what comes out the end. You have to get it there first. And in Taupō's experience, having the pipe break before the treatment plant, that was a huge impact on Taupō and the Waikato River. And so, we create these systems on the assumption that they're infallible. Believe me, wastewater treatment plants are not infallible. They are very much fallible, and so are the networks that get the material to the plant. And so thinking about pre-treatment is a really good idea, not only because it's cost competitive, but it also means that some of this aging plant does not actually need to be replaced, but rather it can just be repurposed to a polishing function rather than the full treatment that it tries to do not so well at the moment. So it's quite a big shift in terms of wastewater thinking, but it is an alternative, I believe, that can be looked at and provide good, reliable, low-risk solutions. And I guess I say low risk because climate change is not going to get any easier. And climate change is a threat to all of our pipe networks, our wastewater treatment systems, the whole lot, because of what it adds, but also because of the increased risk to the integrity of those pipelines and things. Sorry, I've started giving a lecture here, I'll shut up. But it was a comment I heard earlier that I thought, well, there are some solutions that could be cost competitive and should be looked at. So, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Dr. Morgan. Really appreciate your input this morning. I suspect there's going to be knocks on your door going forward. Thank you. Kia ora.
I've got plenty of work, but I'll try and find somebody with some whakapapa legs to help out, and I'll fully support them in May. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Okay, everyone, just so that we all know exactly where we're heading from this point, we're just on, we've got about 2 hours without making everybody at the end. And I've got 6 people on the list. One person's not confirmed. I have 7, but there's one not made any contact with them at this stage. So we've got 6 to go, 2 hours, so we should be pretty good, but I just don't want everyone to think that we've got all the time in the world this morning, because I do think it'd be nice to hear from everybody while this flow is coming. So on that note, we'll move on, and the next person that I have on the list, is it coming in for this K by Teams? Yep. So we've got another person coming in by Teams, Linda Kay.
Can you... Oh, there I am. Yes.
Hello, we can see you and we can hear you, so over to you, Ms. Kay.
Tō koutou, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just in awe of the people who've spoken so far, and I hope that I can make some contribution. My name is Linda Kay, and I live in Kohu, and I've been here for 20 years. And I'm Pākehā, born and raised in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But my people are Jewish, and they come from Eastern Europe. My parents came to Aotearoa in 1938. And these days, my work is I am a Hebrew scribe of sacred documents. In a previous life, I was a lawyer and disputes tribunal referee and chaired professional disciplinary bodies. But my claim to expertise here is that I live on Old Beach Road in Kohu, behind the area where the Poutiaki stand. So on the south side of my property is the Kohu Clinic, and on the north side is a house that is unoccupied. And so I am perhaps the only person who lives day and minute by minute with the inlet-outlet location of the pumping station on Old Beach Road. And I do want to talk about that, but I wanted first to make some general statement from my, it's a general supplementary statement, if that's okay. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, we are. Yep, that's fine.
I was a bit concerned about the Jacobs report in the way, in the weighting of what they called their multi-criteria assessment. I felt that the technical sounding terminology can't conceal or justify a process that categorises multicultural values and indeed environmental and climate change issues as worth less than half the significance of alleged economic affordability. I question and challenge the premise of competing priorities, but if there is an insistence on some kind of hierarchy, then I would propose that multicultural values be overriding criterion, because presumably if we implemented a system, designed and implemented a system in harmony with multicultural values, we'll surely meet the objectives of optimal